Hello, I'm hg3 with Gwent City. I wanted to show off my Queen Mork deck to you guys today. This is a deck that has gotten some love on GwentDB, and I'm very grateful for that. I appreciate everyone that's tuned into my stream and has seen this along with my other decks in play and have responded kindly. So I thought it was only fair for me to explain some of the choices I made in this deck when I decided to put it together like this. So Queen Mork is a deck that's entirely based on making the most out of the Skellige bread and butter of being able to buff up base strength. That is the attribute of the Shieldsmiths. Shieldsmiths are able to add 4 to the base strength of a unit's strength. Well, so basically what that means is that instead of having a green number for when you get buffed, which would occur with buffs that go over your strength, you're actually moving up the unit's permanent strength. So even when they go to the graveyard, that doesn't get cleared. That works well in synergy with both of our key components on the front line. We have Morkvarg, who is the coolest werewolf in the game. See, when he gets enough damage to remove him from the battlefield, instead he just loses 2 strength and he comes back into action immediately. What this allows for us to do is to build up his base strength and not only use him throughout the course of all 3 rounds, as he'll keep coming back, but also he's a blocker for us for Scorches, renders them almost completely useless when he's in play, because all a Scorch is doing is removing 2 strength from a character, whereas if he was someone like full geared, at least they'd take him off for a round, even though he would come back as well. But no, it's blocking that completely, and we're still going to keep his strength on the battlefield for a long time. So this investment of Shieldsmiths into Mork is especially powerful. Our secondary option, of course, though, is to use Shieldsmiths onto the Queen's Guard. The Queen's Guard are interesting because they come as a semi-sort of muster trio, except they're a graveyard muster. So when their compatriots are in the graveyard, they're able to rally them up. So not only do Queen's Guard have great value and synergy with our discard abilities, which include Ermion and Last Wish, but they also act as a pseudo-res if we happen to pull them going into round 2 or 3, which is nice to have as Skellige, because then we can use our additional reses, the Priestess of Freya that we would otherwise use in the Queen's Guard. We can use it to get additional Shieldsmiths or bring out something like a Heime to buff the row. So, in principle, what this deck wants to do is to buff up either Mork or one of the trio of Queen's Guard and keep them on the battlefield each turn to try and set up kind of like a hurdle for the opponent to try and get by in terms of strength. And while we're doing that, we have some other components in play as well. Of course, we have our control down here. Lacerate is what you'd like to use against monsters, and it's pretty good against the other factions, but definitely want to mulligan for Lacerate and keep Lacerates against the monster factions, because you get lots of value on the ranged row and the melee row. Melee row you can clear out Wild Hunt Riders and put damage on whatever else is there. Ranged row, you're going to be able to take out your Foglets and put damage on the Ancient Foglet, who's probably there as a blocker. Meanwhile, Manticore's Venom is a little bit better against Northern Realms, since it's enough damage to kill off something like a Redania Elite or one of the Catapults or Trebuchets in the back line. So we tech in enough of these to be able to use them in any scenario. But if we knew what faction we were going to play against, we'd be able to alter this a little bit. And for example, if I knew I was playing against Northern Realms, I would take out 2 Lacerates, and I'd probably include something like 2 Raiders, so that I can get extra value for my discards when I'm not able to discard the Queen's Guard, which happens, fairly often. We also have Skal, who is a very interesting unit, and I'm not 100% sure he's the best unit right now, but he's very fun to play. He offers a bit of control in that he does 3 damage to the opponent's strongest units, and he also, when he dies, transforms into Craven, which will add 2 strength to anyone placed on the row next to him. So this has great synergy with Queen's Guard. It has great synergy with Crack on Crate and his leader ability. So we're able to utilize that pretty well, and it also allows us to set up a really nice starting point for the second round. If we have Mork on the board, Skull's Craven Revive form on the board, and then we're bringing out Queen's Guard. So we really want to mount pressure and make the opponent use a lot of cards to try and catch up to our investment from early on in the game through Shieldsmiths, through our reses, and while we're doing that we have the opportunity to control and manipulate the game as well. I also have a variation of this deck that I consider a budget variation, since this form of the deck is pretty expensive. I have a lot of the luxurious kind of gold cards and the specials as well, such as Decoy was in that deck, Last Swish, and Zoltan I consider a luxury neutral. So this is the budget variation. You could see that we've teched out, instead of Last Swish, we have Svenrego, who's probably the best replacement for that if you're playing Skellige. Instead of Decoy, we included Sigurd Drifa, who you could make an argument for in the main deck as well. It's pretty close. I might try and find a way to fit her in on some occasions. Instead of Zoltan, we have Ciri, so it would go from a legendary to an epic, and a lot of people are going to have Ciri because she's good with multiple factions. And Ceres is still here because I couldn't find in my collection a replacement, but you can replace her with almost any gold card. And people would like to holler about how if you replace Ceres with any gold card, then the Queen's Guard is going to lose value. But I assure you the Queen's Guard is still very powerful in and of itself. The alternative to Queen's Guard being our Skirmishers, who are also very good. These two units kind of are the core units for any Skellige deck that does not involve a ton of weather. But the reason why we chose Queen's Guard is because Queen's Guard are able to work better with flat buffs, and we're including a fair bit of flat buffs, especially in the original deck, where we also have Zoltan, but we have our Haymaze as well. And flat buffs are one way to deal with weather when we don't have other options, when Dimeridian Bomb has been used or is not in our hand. So that helps us out a little bit more than when if we had Skirmishers, you kind of have to focus on having one Skirmisher being super big. Also, the Skirmisher's strength can contest the Morkvarg, so that the Morkvarg isn't an end-all blocker anymore. You also notice that Skal isn't in this form of the deck. Instead we have Olgierd. You can also replace Olgierd with Judah if you have her. So that's the main tech option I'd say for him. The rest of the cards you should have. Geralt is a default card. You can definitely acquire Queen's Guard, your Freyas, your Shieldsmiths, and your Haymaze pretty easily. And Dimeridian Bomb, I'm not sure if you come with it initially, but this card is worth its weight in gold and is almost 100% essential in every single Skellige deck. So, Ermion is probably the same way. If you don't have these two cards, you're going to struggle a bit of Skellige. So, I hope this was interesting for you. Once again, I want to thank everyone for the support on GwentDB, looking up this deck and maybe giving it a try if you have the resources to do so. I also want to thank everyone that's been tuning into my stream recently. It has been really fun. And if you haven't tuned into my stream, you can check me out. I usually go from 3 p.m. Eastern until 9 p.m. Eastern. We might change those hours a little bit, but it would only be by an hour or so. So be sure to check me out when you get an opportunity. You'll see some of these decks live, and we'll have a great time. I'm hg3 from Gwent City, and I'll see you next time.